Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. Bidenomics. Bidenomics working. The numbers have come out for the June job numbers. Wow. Yeah, I know that my Republican friends hoping, wishing, working for recession, want to see some bad news. Because I was told these job numbers, well, you think they're going to be good. They're not. They're going to flatten out, I was told. I was told to expect somewhere around 200,000. Dow was expecting 220. They had revised some things down in May. 497,000 jobs for the month. That is the biggest monthly increase since July of 2022. And this is one of those things where you go, I know what the economic talking heads, I know what the right-wing politicos are wishing and hoping for, but the economy seems to be rolling right along, even as the Fed is trying to slam on the brakes. From a sectoral standpoint, they're saying that the hospitality and leisure sector added 232,000 new jobs in the month, 97,000 construction jobs, and 90,000 in transportation and utilities. Now, this is one of those things where you go, wow, things are going good. Wages increased by 6.4%. That means, well, things are getting better for working people. Now, of course, it's inflationary. These increased wages, it's going to mean, it's going to be inflation. And look, I had one of those conversations today. Had one of those conversations with a friend today. Good friend. Telling me, I'm so concerned. All I hear about is, they keep saying we're spending this money and it's causing all this inflation. And I'm concerned it's going to erode, my pension. It's going to erode all this other stuff. And my mind is like, if we had stronger unions, if we had better bargaining power, because corporate America is wildly profitable, doing wildly well. I argue that the inflation that we're suffering under is by choice. Corporate America is sticking it to us at every opportunity. And the fact that wages are starting to creep up a little bit, I think that's a good thing. I think it could be very helpful. Now, the 97,000 construction jobs, that to me, very, very important. Means we're rebuilding stuff, means we're doing something, means we're bringing some manufacturing back. The reason I bring this up, Wall Street Journal today had a really telling article. Something you may have heard here on the program for the last 18 years, but it's good to know that the Wall Street Journal, the newspaper of the investor class, it's nice to know that they're finally coming around. Maybe someone was tuning into the program, heard something, they go, oh, this is important, because it is. The headline, "The West again learns that war needs industry." And they point out that behind the lines in Ukraine and with Russia is stuff. You need to have supply lines, you need to have guns, you need to have ammunition, you need to have stuff. Tires a big thing, and good ones, not those cheap, crappy Chinese ones, but actually good tires so that you get out of the mud. Learn that right from the beginning. And I like how in the article they said, Russia and Ukraine, they're battling this out, and it's a lesson. This is what they wrote. It's a lesson Washington is relearning. And I'll point out that our friends over at the Alliance for American Manufacturing did a pretty substantial report a decade ago laying out all the deficiencies in our supply chain for our military. And it's only gotten worse over the last decade. And so if it's one of these things where we go, well, Washington's relearning it, I don't know. I think Joe Biden is moving us in the right direction. Again, ending the neoliberal nonsense of outsourcing jobs and corporatizing profits and socializing losses. and harming working people by gutting their wages and their benefits, I'm thrilled about the way Biden's taking us. But it's interesting to see the Wall Street Journal, the newspaper of the investor class, saying, you should probably think of this. And they're right. We should. And that's why Biden is out doing his cross-country tour, getting out the message about rebuilding our economy, rebuilding our country, the Investing in America tour. South Carolina today, talking about the jobs that are going to be created, and one in particular, this N phase is in South Carolina. It's going to create nationwide about 1,800 jobs, 600 in North Carolina. Its manufacturing partner Flex going to create some of these jobs. Now, me personally, I get why Biden's in South Carolina. James Claiborne, we want to try and compete there. I'd still love to see these jobs in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Illinois or any of the states that have been decimated by Reaganomics and deindustrialization. But bringing these jobs back is a good thing. New creations of jobs, a good thing here. And back to the Wall Street Journal piece, the newspaper of the investor class. They seem in favor of now reshoring manufacturing, because I think rich people going, hey, well, we can make some more money now, because they were afraid they were going to get gutted over in China, because they were. But the president was in South Carolina touting his plans, which is billions of dollars going, for roads and bridges, broadband access, and of course, tunnels. There's a giant tunnel project in New York. Anybody who's ever ridden public transit into New York knows needs help. Anyone who's ever driven into New York City knows needs help. Need to get people off the road and into public transit. Need to make it easier to get in and out of the city. There is a $6.88 billion tunnel program. It is the most ever awarded to a mass transit project in this country. And what I want to see is, look, I want to see a giant statue. I want to see a giant Joe Biden going, I did that. I want to see a massive Joe Biden going, I did that. The job numbers. He should be coming out going, yeah, me, this guy right here. The B-man. Jelly Bucket Joe, here I am, Builder Biden. Because Democrats don't do this well. If Trump had just a smidgen of the success that Biden's had, you would have never heard the end of it. It would be nonstop. And this is where Democrats got to pull your heads out of the sand and say, look, I know Joe Biden can't get a sentence out, so let's get it out for him. Biden did this stuff. It's Biden's plans. It's Biden's policies. It's what they pushed through. And we need it. This is the thing. And, I had someone email me and say, hey, you need to talk to this guy in Minnesota because of the Minnesota miracle, because they're taking some of this money and they are rebuilding their state and the jobs that are being created. Again, this isn't rocket science. This is pretty simple, basic, just common sense economics. If you bring money in to build something, you're going to create good union construction jobs. Those jobs are going to have a reverberation effect across the entire local economy, because those construction workers are going to need clothes, they're going to need meals, they're going to need housing, they're going to down the list. That means other jobs. That means hospitality jobs. The fact that how many hospitality jobs? 232,000 across the country. Those are people going back to working in bars and restaurants and serving people who have what? You can say it, disposable income. I know it's something that we've kind of forgotten, but it's something we got to fight for. So as I'm looking at this moment, this is good stuff. And the fact that Biden's approval ratings are so down in the dumps is incredible to me. And it speaks volumes to the power of right-wing messaging. Speaks volumes to the power of the F channel and their copycats. speaks volumes to negativity. You know, all I've heard about the last couple of days, everyone's emailing me, it's cocaine gate. There's cocaine all over the place. Biden's doing coke on the Resolute desk. I go, no, he's not. If he were, he would be much more energetic. And look, I love Joe Biden, and I think the guy is doing the right stuff. But you got to realize, you know, he's getting up there. And you know, as someone asked me, do you want him as president? Yeah, I want his policies, man. I want what he's brought. I want the vision of where he wants us to go. I want to reshore our manufacturing. I want to be the world's manufacturer again. I want to be what we were 30, 40 years ago. I want to be that bridge in Trenton, New Jersey that says Trenton makes, the world takes. I want that to be a reality. I want those jobs to be here. I want those products to be here. I want the innovation, the entrepreneurial spirit. I want all that stuff here. Because we let policymakers, we let politicians funded by greedy CEOs undo the most powerful economy that this planet has ever seen. And why? So that they could make more and you could make less. So they could crush those unions. They could crush those workers who, 40 years ago were making $20, $25 an hour with the best health care you could possibly get and a defined benefit pension. They ruined all of that. They ruined the American dream. They ruined the middle class. They ruined what my grandparents fought for. And it's our job to claw that back. And we've finally got a guy in the White House who gets it. Finally, a guy in the White House is saying, policy-wise, we need to undo the horrible of the past. So I give Joe Biden credit. I give him credit for head on, taking the right-wing nonsense. And this is the greatest part. You don't see him engaging any of that. He's just showing up, doing his job. Jelly Bucket Joe on the job, man. So I want him to get 4 more years. I want to see what we can do in the next 4 years to reshore our manufacturing and create the jobs of the future. I do. Want to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you will find ours. Quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, let the fun begin. You knew the Republican-led House was going to be entertaining. You know it. You knew from the beginning that they couldn't help themselves. They were going to end up eating their own. And today they did. The Freedom Caucus, the Tea Party folks, the ones out on the fringe, the Scott Perrys. Scott Perry, my congressman, evidently they ate one of their own today, claiming that Marjorie Trainwreck Green is not conservative enough. She's not enough of a lunatic. So she's out. And I'm like, wow, that's that is impressive, and I love the fact that they gave her the ouster, so that is good. Now here's another one of my favorite things. This is, I had to sign up for Threads today, and I'm not a Facebook person. Not a big Facebook person. We post stuff occasionally just about the show. I don't engage in a lot, but I had to sign up for Threads today, if for no other reason than to thumb my nose at Elon Musk over Twitter, because evidently they're not pleased with the competition. Now remember, it was all about free speech. I feel sorry for the woman who became the CEO that Elon brought in to eat that giant you-know-what sandwich. I liken her to the Devin Nunes. So she's going to be the new Devin Nunes. She tweeted out that, Twitter's the place for free speech. And, I don't even think she believes this. But I had to sign up for the Threads as for no other reason than to make a bigger number for Elon to get angry about. And now, evidently, they've threatened to sue. Threatening to sue. And I'm waiting to see how that plays out. Should be entertaining. Now, on social media, what's going on? You got Donald Trump doing what he does, and it is all about being as reckless as ever. Evidently, he re-truthed or sub-truthed or whatever that is over there, what was Obama's home address. He had crazy guy out front with some guns, and Chris Christie, and look, I'm not a Chris Christie fan, but good on him for slamming Trump for sharing Obama's address. But understand what Trump wants. Trump wants somebody taken out. He wants the poorly educated, the dim, to go after these people. And, violence and intimidation works. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Kurt from Akron on line 1. Kurt, how are you?
Hey, good evening, Rick, and thank you for taking my call.
What's on your mind, brother?
Well, you know what disgusted me more today about that speech down in South Carolina that President Biden gave today?
Do tell.
Not one major media outlet covered it.
Yeah.
That disgusts me in the sense that, you got a twice impeached, twice indicted former president who gets all this billion-dollar free advertising whenever he even makes a fart. And Joe Biden has a great policy speech. And I will say he's not the greatest speaker in the world, but he gets the job done. And yet the media won't cover it because he's not entertaining enough for the people.
Yeah.
It goes back to your poorly educated thing you just said, too. But, another thing that I wonder the media will I even heard it today on Tom Hartman, that there were supposed to be like a little under 300,000 jobs created for the month of June.
Yep. And
apparently we have just a little under 500,000 jobs that were created.
497,000. Yep. If any of that would have happened during the Trump years, you would have never heard the end of it.
Exactly. And then if you heard it during the Obama years, Trump would have said, "Oh, those are fake numbers."
Yeah, heads I win, tails you lose.
Exactly. And as far as this whole Obama address thing, I just don't get it with Donald Trump and his throat stencil or whatever.
Oh, I do. I
that.
completely get it, Kurt. It's all about intimidating people. It's all about threatening and harassing. It's all about engaging the dim among us to go do violent things, to make prosecutors are being threatened. I mean, he wants people showing up at people's homes and intimidating them.
Cokehead? Did he say that Jack Smith was a cokehead on there too?
Yeah. Look,
and then get this, he retrost or whatever you want to call it, some meme that someone put on his platform about 81 million votes, and I've never seen in my life a pro-Biden hat, flag, or shirt, or something of that nature. And I'm going to clean this up where it said, "Let's go, Brandon," and you know what I mean by that. And then it said, "Let's go, Brandon," to anyone who voted for Biden. That's a real classy former president, wouldn't you say?
As I put on social media, this is presidential now, I guess. And is this the kind of guy you want in the White House? Someone who's going to repost the F Biden flag. And no, I would hope, I would hope people would be angry enough to say, no, we're going to throw this clown to the curb. But, the cult, Kurt.
It is, and it's like I had a problem with a guy today on social media where I tweeted that speech from the White House YouTube channel today, and he said right away, well, everything he says is just a lie. And it's getting to the point where, are these people lied to so much that they don't even know what the truth is when it's finally told to them?
Yeah.
Kind of like Harry Truman says, how many times do you have to be hit on the head before you figure out who's hitting you?
Absolute truth. Truth. Good stuff, Kurt. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and you have a good night.
You as well. Look, the reality is what it is. He wants to incite violence. They want the cult to go and do the things that they're going to do. Now, it's interesting. A while ago, you may remember this for people who've been listening for a while. I had someone tell me, Kari Lake's going to be the vice president. It'll be Trump and Kari Lake. And I said, it's never going to be Kari Lake. Never, ever, ever will you see Kari Lake as his vice president. And look, I'm gonna continue with this. Evidently now some of the insiders in the Trump world are saying that, Donald's kind of cooling on her. Now, if you remember, what I said was, there's no way an egomaniac like Trump can be in the same room with someone who takes away from him, who detracts from him. He's never going to put someone on the ticket who's going to be more interesting. Mike Pence was the perfect milquetoast candidate to go along with Trump. He was. Nobody noticed he was in the room. Nobody noticed and cared what he had to say. He was the bucket of warm spit. Kari Lake actually, gets some attention. Good-looking woman, firebrand, got crazy stuff to say, could get the base all tingly in the panties. So I said, there's no way Trump takes her because she would detract from his star. She would make people turn away from Donald and to her, and you can't have that. So when I saw this story today that the Trump advisors are going, at the heart of Trump's frustration is that, she always wants attention. She's a spotlight hound, and she always wants attention. And Trump can't have that because Trump always wants attention. He is an attention hound. And I got to think it goes back to his childhood. There's a part of me that goes, it wasn't hugged, wasn't breastfed, wasn't loved. I don't know, but it just seems it is what it is. But when folks were going, no, she's never going to be the candidate. You're going to find someone who's boring to go along with him because he's got to be the center of attention. You never pick someone as your number two who should have been the number one. Think John Edwards. Kerry choosing Edwards was a not a great choice because Edwards was much more interesting than John Kerry, which is why Al Gore, who was quite boring, chose Trader Joe Lieberman. Just is what it is. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1988. That was the day 167 oil workers were killed in the Piper Alpha oil rig explosion in the North Sea. It is considered the world's deadliest oil rig accident ever. Around 10 p.m., the platform essentially turned into a fireball so massive, rescue helicopters could not get near it. Gas lines ruptured when the night crew accidentally activated a gas pump down for repairs. Immediately, the platform was rocked with explosions, first wiping out the control room, then engulfing it in flames. The platform split into two. Its oil derrick toppled. Most were killed instantly, as the crew's quarters were directly above the gas compression module. Toxic fumes overcame others. Some jumped 100 feet into the sea. The platform was completely destroyed. It took 3 weeks to bring the fire under control. Occidental Petroleum later admitted the rig's design was fundamentally flawed, but many considered the explosion nothing short of industrial murder. The rig was notorious for fatalities and near misses. Jack Malloy, head of the offshore trade union OILC, recalled Piper was synonymous with accidents. People would say, "Piper? Oh, you don't want to go there. That place is ready to go." Conditions were so bad, the union pulled its reps off the safety committee. The next day, 115 oil workers in Humberside walked off the job, demanding better health and safety conditions. Subsequent investigations determined Occidental failed to enforce basic maintenance and safety procedures. Over 100 safety improvements were recommended. Occidental paid out $100 million to the families, but escaped prosecution. Today, there is a memorial chapel at the Kirk of St. Nicholas and a memorial sculpture in the Rose Garden of Hazelhead Park, both in Aberdeen, Scotland.
2 pieces of good advice. Never sign nothing by neon, and never negotiate with snakes. But Joe Biden violated both rules this year, getting out-negotiated by Senate Republicans and their tag-along Democrat Joe Manchin. As a result, Biden completely surrendered an urgently needed program for America, universal child care. The U.S. child care system is broken at every level. Availability is scarce, and even if parents can find an opening, the price is forbidding. Yet, care providers and teachers are grossly underpaid. So we're doomed by corporate greed and Washington's indifference, right? Wrong. Grassroots people across the country are demanding and getting real change at the state level. Last year, for example, voters in New Mexico rallied a decade-long care rebellion to put a landmark initiative on the ballot to guarantee that all children ages 0 to 5 have a constitutional right to quality early childhood education. Moreover, Amendment 1 allocates a steady stream of money from New Mexico's Land Grant Permanent Fund to make this promise real. The vote initiative passed with 70% of the vote. Vermont, led by such persistent grassroots groups as Let's Grow Kids, is providing $130 million a year to establish a solid base for universal child care. Last month, the Republican governor vetoed the funding provision, but a bipartisan legislative majority, prodded by public demand, has now voted to override the veto. Also, the red state legislature in Tennessee is providing a new and essential child care benefit to low-income parents of infants and toddlers, diapers. And even some in the U.S. Congress are beginning to get the child care message, having formed the first ever Congressional Dads Caucus to push family-friendly policies. This is Jim Hightower saying, when leaders won't lead, the people must shove them out of the way.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday on the program, we talked about this 16-year-old it's Wisconsin now. Yesterday I thought it was Michigan, but it's on the Michigan border, but it's in Wisconsin, where this 16-year-old kid was killed in a logging accident or in a hardwood logging facility. We don't know what the details are yet, but we know a 16-year-old is somewhere in the logging industry, which is the most dangerous industry in this country. More people die, get hurt, all of that stuff in the logging industry than any other place. So what's a 16-year-old doing? And I know, teaching responsibility, getting work ethic. Yeah. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on this story and, where sadly we may be going. I've asked our good friend Jordan Barab to come talk with us. Jordan was a former acting assistant secretary and deputy assistant secretary of labor for OSHA during the Obama years. He does an incredible blog, jordanbarab.com/confined spaces. You will find all of the horrible things that happen, and somebody at least is bringing this attention. Jordan, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure, glad to be here.
So I'm looking at this story of this 16-year-old kid. I have no idea why a 16-year-old kid is in an industry that is as dangerous as this one is. Any insight?
No, I mean, we have a lot of states, Wisconsin, Iowa, and many others who are lowering, standards and requirements for young workers. And is it because of the alleged labor shortage, or just because they want to pay them less? The Iowa law actually exempts them from any kind of liability as well. So basically, what they're finding is, in these young people, what employers are finding is a very vulnerable workforce, workers who don't know their rights, if they have any rights, being so young, and even if they know their rights, they're afraid to assert their rights. It's their first job. What do they know?
Yeah.
They don't know if they're dangerous. If they're not trained, they don't know if they're dangerous. It's prime fodder, for exploitive reporters. I'm sorry, exploitive employers. But unfortunately, these are the most vulnerable workers. And they're getting killed. I mean, you mentioned the one in the sawmill a few weeks ago. Another 16-year-old was killed in a landfill. We're not quite sure of the details there, but obviously, I used to work for ASME. We used to represent landfill workers. I mean, these are incredibly dangerous jobs, moving equipment and dangerous machinery, toxic chemicals. I mean, you don't want to be working there as an adult, much less having your 16-year-old kid work there.
Yeah, and as I've been saying, Jordan, that the sad reality is we're now a society where you almost have to have 3 incomes to get by. I mean, there was my grandparents' generation where 1 income could support a family. There was a period, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where it was 2 incomes. Now I think we're at that 3 income threshold where you got to push the kids out in the workforce if you want to stay in the house and put food on the table.
Yeah, that, or if you want to go to college, and God forbid get out of college without a crippling debt, you want to make some good money, and I'm sure these jobs, that put their lives at risk, probably pay some decent money, but is it worth it at that age to risk your life, when you should be working in a supermarket or babysitting, and hopefully going to a college that you can afford.
No, look, I wish that were the case, but when we talked with the one state rep in Iowa, Sammy Sheets, who was on a construction site and found 12-year-olds working in there, they weren't making big money.
No.
You've literally got 12-year-olds in a construction site, and this is what the Iowa law is, I guess, bringing us.
Yeah. Well, the Iowa law disguises them as apprentices or student learners. It's just a way of trying to get around federal law, and we'll see. Hopefully that won't work, because ultimately federal law should preempt state law, but they're trying for all these loopholes, with apprenticeships and things like that. But the fact is, the work is the same, the hazards are the same, and kids are dying.
I want to unpack that for a second, because right when that came out, we talked about it extensively. That what the state was allowing to happen is basically the companies to have immunity if any of these kids get hurt on the job, because it's an apprenticeship program. It's approved by the school, so maybe the school's liable, or maybe nobody's liable, and kids get hurt, maimed, killed, and nobody's responsible. That seems clever.
Yeah, and even for workers' comp. I mean, companies already get away with a lot with workers' comp. You can't sue your employer because you have to go through workers' comp. And now these kids don't even have those rights.
Well, average workers don't have the right to sue their employer either, because we gave up our constitutional right to access to the courts because of the grand bargain. And sadly, what's happened over the last several decades is employers have gotten further and further away from being responsible. I know here in Pennsylvania, the laws have been weakened over the decades to where, God help you if you get hurt on the job in this state.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a state-by-state race to the bottom. I mean, that's part of the problem with workers' comp, is it's a state-by-state program. So, you have this race to the bottom where every state is trying to weaken their workers' comp laws more than the state next door to attract more business. That's why we have federal programs like OSHA and federal programs like Wage and Hour, which hopefully can actually set national standards, so you don't have the kind of race to the bottom that we're seeing with workers' comp.
I like the way you put that, hopefully, because I'm sure you, like I, have been watching our Supreme Court, and it seems like there's no law that's decided. There's nothing that they won't overturn or make up out of whole cloth. And I fear we're heading so far backwards to somewhere in a worse place than the Lochner era, that these child labor law things stand, that, more attacks on workers' comp and all of the 20th century are allowed to happen.
Yeah. Well, when Donald Trump was elected, and he brought one of his main advisors there was a guy named Steve Bannon, who we all know, who I think was in jail for a while before Trump pardoned him. But his goal, and he stated it right out front, his goal was what he called deconstructing the administrative state. And the administrative state, to them is basically all of the laws, all of the agencies that protect workers, that protect consumers, that protect the environment. OSHA, Wage and Hour, EPA, Consumer Product Safety Commission. What he's trying to do, and what business is trying to do, and what the court is chipping away from, although they haven't quite made the final blow yet. What they're trying to take away are these agencies' authority to really set the kind of standards that Congress originally gave them when they passed these laws. And now you have Congress kind of, again, they're just creating stuff out of thin air, like their so-called major questions doctrine. That major questions doctrine, the Supreme Court decides, well, Congress may have given OSHA discretion to do this, but it's kind of a big issue. So really they should go back to Congress to get authority for that. And you're seeing this all over the place. You're seeing legislation now called, one bill called the REINS Act, which the House has passed, which would say that no agency can issue any standards or regulations, EPA, OSHA, unless Congress approves them. And we all know what Congress is, especially with Republicans, is best at doing, nothing. So these agencies can be working for years on regulations that protect the public or protect workers. And if Congress doesn't say, all right, we approve those, which obviously they're not going to do, it's all for naught. We don't have any regulations. We don't have any protections.
And what's interesting to me is, again, all I hear from my Republican friends is job-killing regulations. You're killing jobs, Jordan.
Yeah, and all the studies that have been done about that, show just the opposite. I mean, safety. Big companies know this. There's some good companies that know this, but it's not good business to be injuring and killing your workers. Unless you have an infinite supply of workers to come in, and that's what's happening now with the low income workers, or kids for that matter.
Yep.
One gets hurt, one gets killed. There's always plenty more to bring in there, and if they're low skilled, you're not losing anything.
And especially if they're kids. I mean, at the end of the day, now look, they're not going to be your kids or my kids. We know who they're going to be, and they're exploitable, they're desperate, and ripe for the picking. And that's where federal laws, or state laws for that matter, are supposed to step in and protect kids from these kind of low road employers. It's infuriating. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Jordan Barab. Jordan's a former acting assistant secretary and deputy assistant secretary of labor for OSHA. Also, make sure you check out his website, jordanbarab.com/confined spaces. This is a must-go-to site if you care about working people. Now, what I want to go back to for a second is because, I say all the time, Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do, not the rhetoric that comes out of their mouth. And I go, OSHA was put into law by Richard Nixon, a Republican. This could never happen today, but there was a time in the past where you didn't have Republicans as bad as they are today. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you used to have kind of a bipartisan consensus, that workers need basic protection, and health and safety protection and wage and hour protection. There were moderate Republicans back in the day. I know it's hard to remember that now, that kind of agreed that you needed these kind of laws. Obviously there was a fight about how strong to make them and that type of thing, but there was a general consensus that these laws were needed. And that consensus, I think, stated, there was always, all the way back to the Carter administration, there were accusations that OSHA was killing jobs, but it was really, kind of the Newt Gingrich Congress that really started to, hold this anti-regulatory stuff and make it as important as it was, as it's become, and made OSHA kind of the public enemy number one with its ergonomic standards, which they finally repealed. And ever since then, OSHA has been, EPA has been, wage and hour have been, public enemy number one. And you've unfortunately seen the effects of that. You have all of these agencies, especially OSHA and wage and hour, are incredibly understaffed. Very small agencies, tiny agencies. OSHA's entire budget is only about $632 million, which is incredibly small considering their mandate. They have the mandate to protect the health and safety of 158 million workers in 10.9 million workplaces, with a very tiny budget. And wage and hours budget is even smaller, and they're the ones that are supposed to be policing workplaces for child labor and wage theft and things like that. They have nowhere near the resources to be able to do the job that Congress gave them. And now you have not only Republicans in Congress, but the courts trying to take away, whatever authority they have.
Which is why on the wage theft front, what is it? The wage theft accounts for 10 times what all of the robberies and all the stick-up gas station jobs and all of the theft combined. It's like 10 times the much. But you never see employers go to jail for robbing their workers. It's because it's not in front. It's not front and center, Jordan. It's not one of the things that we see on the evening news.
Yep. And then you see these. I mean, these crazy things that the employers, some of them get caught, but for everyone that gets caught, there are probably 100 out there that don't get caught. I mean, one hired someone to be a fake priest and take workers' confessions about any crimes they may have committed in the workplace. I mean, luckily, Wage and Hour caught up with them. I mean, you had another one where a worker was complaining he hadn't gotten his final paycheck. I can't remember how many thousands of dollars it was, but basically the employer said fine. The worker complained. There was a ruling against the employer. The employer said fine and delivered the last paycheck in pennies on the worker's driveway. So I mean, even it's just trying to chase these things down, trying to become aware of them, having enough staff and resources to enforce them, and being constantly under attack in the courts. Which means you need lawyers, you need to hire lawyers. I mean, it's very frustrating, and again, people are getting cheated and they're getting killed because of it.
Lastly, I want to get your thoughts on, because as I've said a moment ago, I believe Republicans hate working people. Again, look at what they do. The Texas governor signs this Death Star bill, and within days, you've got, a postal worker who dies on the job. You've got other workers who are dying on the job because the ultimate preemption bill went and undid breaks for people in high temperature areas, and it literally immediately cost people their lives.
Yeah, I mean, the workers that died there wouldn't have been covered by the ordinance that the governor, would be repealing. But I mean, if you're a politician or a governor in a state and you pretend to care about people and you pretend to care about workers, and you see workers in your state dying of heat, because they aren't given the breaks and they aren't given the water, wouldn't you think you would, look into maybe strengthening worker protections instead of weakening them? I mean, in the face of death, they're going the opposite way, and they're just ensuring that more workers will die. It's just incredible, and why people don't vote these people out of office, lock, stock, and barrel. I just really don't understand, because they're so blatantly, not just anti-worker, but pro-death, and it should be obvious to everyone.
Yeah, and again, for me, these are election issues. So the always question I end up with is, what do we do? How do we fix this? How do we? Because look, I haven't met any working person who goes, yeah, I want to be less safe at work. Yeah, I want to be killed on the job. I want to be injured and maimed. Most people I know are like, no, I want to be safe. I want to go home to see my wife and kids. I want to be able to spend the fruits of my labor. What do we do?
Well, Rick, I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about, back, when Richard Nixon signed the Occupational Safety and Health Act, and there were moderate Republicans then. The other difference between now and 50 years ago is you had much stronger unions and workers, who are much more organized. And if you're in a union, you have much better protections against any kind of exploitation, including, your health and safety on the job. I mean, if you're looking at, trying to tell people what to do now, I mean, obviously, voting these worker hating Republicans out of office. I mean, that's the obvious first step, but also organizing unions, and collectively acting, collective bargaining, collectively acting, joining whatever worker groups, organizing groups, and obviously labor unions, because ultimately, even the people that founded OSHA understood that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration would never be big enough or powerful enough to guarantee the health and safety of workers all over the country. And that law gave workers a lot of rights in the law. But back then it was kind of assumed that workers would have, unions, and they would be able to use these rights through their unions. Now they don't have those unions, and it's very difficult, for workers even to use the rights that they've been given in the law, because they're afraid of retaliation, or they don't know about their rights, or they aren't trained about the hazards they have because they don't belong to unions.
That's an excellent point. It really is. And this is where, again, I talk about strengthening unions and people joining and forming unions, but also we've got to save the laws that we have and the agencies that we've got to help us fight for the vulnerable, for the 16-year-old kid who's in a sawmill. I was talking to a friend the other day who had said, years ago, that in these sawmills, there was a kid, he was doing research for a book, and there was an 8-year-old kid that got killed in one of these sawmills. And what they used to do, this is years ago, they would send these small kids in to clean out the sawdust so they would never have to turn off the blades. So you've got these 8-year-old kids crawling in there. Now, again, I don't think we're that bad yet, and the key word being yet, but I think we could be.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're seeing where they'll send immigrant workers, especially undocumented immigrant workers, into incredibly dangerous jobs because they know they won't complain about it. They may not even be aware of the hazards, and if they get killed, so what? Their body gets shipped back to Latin America. It's the same thing with kids. They're not going to complain about it. They don't know. I mean, they're willing to take the risks, unfortunately, we're seeing what happens there. It's just a new exploitable group of quote unquote workers.
There you go, Jordan. I appreciate the time. Hope folks will check out the website jordanbarab.com/confined spaces. Also look at the rest of the site. Lots of great stuff there. But Jordan, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Rick. Been a pleasure.
Again, check out the website, jordanbarab.com. We'll get links out on social media. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. That was the day that the song The Preacher and the Slave first appeared in the Little Red Songbook. The Little Red Songbook was a compilation of labor songs published by the Industrial Workers of the World Union. The booklet was pocket-sized so labor activists could carry it with them wherever they would go. Music was an important part of the IWW labor culture. Joe Hill was probably the most well-known of the IWW songwriters. Many of the songs penned during this era are still sung at labor rallies and meetings today. But not everyone appreciated the music and the message of the IWW, a radical union that called for all workers to unite together. When IWW activists, or wobblies as they were called, would give speeches, they would sometimes be heckled and jeered. Authorities would harass and break up meetings. Sometimes Salvation Army brass bands that were competing for space and audiences on street corners would disrupt IWW rallies with their music. Joe Hill wrote his song, The Preacher and the Slave, in response to this musical disruption. He set the lyrics to the tune of the hymn In the Sweet By and By. Often, IWW songwriters satirized hymns played by the Salvation Army, which the Wobblies dubbed the Starvation Army. The lyrics tell of long-haired preachers who tell workers to stop agitating because they will eat by and by. The song was a critique of religious leaders who did not help working people. It became one of the most popular Joe Hill tunes.
Long-haired preachers come out every night. They'll try to tell you what's wrong and what's right.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I remember back when I was in high school, I wrote a paper on OSHA. The 1970 OSHA Act and how Richard Nixon was the champion of it. And I think today, it's impossible to get any worker protection anywhere legislatively done. Now, I know here in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State House has moved a piece of legislation that would protect public sector workers, kind of like a public sector version of OSHA. I don't think it's going to get through the Senate, but it's one of those things that, it's possible. It's possible. Maybe, I think there's a governor who would sign it in this state, but there aren't Republicans who go, yeah, we need to protect workers. And this is the thing that blows my mind, because, the people who die on the job, the people who get injured on the job, nobody cares if they're Democrats or Republicans, if they wear the red hat or the blue hat. Their families are screwed. And that's the unfortunate reality in this country. You get hurt on the job, you're done. You're screwed. They'll pay a little bit of money. You'll get a portion of your income. Here in this state, you're only guaranteed 500 weeks, and then they can cut you off onto your own. And there's no health care, there's no pension, there's none of that stuff. And how do you raise a family like that? How do you support a family with that kind of scenario? What we've allowed to happen. I call it the no rights at work agenda. They start off with right to work laws because we don't need them stinking unions. And then they go after unemployment. They cut down the number of weeks. They cut down the benefit. They cut all that and make the obstacles, so hard to get in front of. Then they go after workers' compensation. Of course, gotta gut that because, hey, we need to compete. So the states with the weakest protections for working people are where corporate America wants to go. We never talk about that. We never hear about the fact that, workers are killed every day in this country. Some 5,000 plus killed every year. People who got up in the morning, brushed their teeth, kissed their babies, had their breakfast, drove off to work, and did not come home. Or the thousands, what do they say? It's 90 to 100,000 people die from occupational illnesses where they were exposed to something, took it home, and over the years it ended up killing them. And we've got politicians, Republicans, say who it is, who are okay with that. They would be the same ones who before workers' compensation became the law of the land, who when you would sue, because you used to be able to sue the company because that was, you have the right to sue for anything, over $20 and have a trial by jury. And they would say, look, it's your fault. You knew the risks. You knew what you were doing. You put yourself in a dangerous position. You made the choice to work for this employer in horrible, depressed, dangerous conditions. That's your fault. And they would stack juries with people who thought just like that. Because, of course, we're going to have, some working people go, I work in those conditions safe. It's never going to happen to me until it does. And then you have families who are basically out in the street. And these companies were getting away with killing thousands, tens of thousands of workers. OSHA, workers' comp, all of the advancements of the 20th century made that better. Made it better to where most people now expect to come home at the end of the day. Most people expect to come home in the condition they went to work in. That wasn't always the case, and it's because of the policies that we moved. It's because of the decisions that were made by statesmen. Not Marjorie Trainwreck Green and her holler monkey screed. Not Matt Forehead Gates, not that clan. Because they don't care about working people. Again, Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do. Find me a policy that in the last 40 years, a Republican has proposed, passed, and gotten signed into law that actually benefited a working person. And don't tell me tax breaks because it doesn't benefit working people. Find me one thing. I want to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm actually looking forward to it. If you miss any of the portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Quick break. Right back.
Canada's wildfire season is now officially the worst ever recorded.
Canada's fires shatter records, sending smoky air back to the U.S. and to Europe. Intensifying rainstorms pose hidden flood risk across U.S. Plus,
to remove PFAS from public water systems across the country is an enormously expensive endeavor.
3M settles another lawsuit over forever chemicals in municipal drinking water systems.
All of those toxic stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They want to take away your washing machines and your dryers.
Nope, they don't.
They don't want to give you any water for the washing machine.
Also a lie. This is your Green News Report. Hey, sorry that we got to fire up the Donald Trump fact-checking again, but so be it. What do you have for us today, Desi Doyen?
Well, smoky summers may be our new normal in the U.S. Air quality is again plummeting for millions of Americans, this time in the upper Midwest and Northeast due to smoke from Canadian wildfires. This week, Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit vied for the city with the worst air quality in the world. The Canadian smoke has even crossed the Atlantic Ocean to hit the UK and Spain. Officials in Canada say 2023 is officially Canada's biggest fire season in modern history, with fires coast to coast, driven by unusually hot and dry weather. And it's not even peak fire season yet. Canada's wildfire emissions are also breaking records. Europe's climate service Copernicus reports that over the last 20 years, Canada's carbon emissions from wildfires have increased along with the land area burned. This year, Canada's fires have released 85% of its annual average greenhouse emissions. That's roughly equivalent to Indonesia's annual carbon emissions from burning fossil fuels. Abundant scientific evidence shows human-caused climate change is intensifying wildfires, creating a self-reinforcing feedback loop as the fires send more climate-warming emissions into the atmosphere, in turn worsening global warming and wildfire conditions.
Yeah, but think about all the money that Canada's made from all that dirty tar sands oil.
Good point. In Texas, the relentless, record-shattering heat wave has sent hundreds of people to emergency rooms and killed at least 13, including in the state's prisons, which mostly have no air conditioning.
Wow.
Extreme heat now kills more people in the United States than any other weather event, according to federal data. Especially dangerous are multiple consecutive days of extreme heat and warm overnights that don't allow our bodies to cool down. A recent Climate Central analysis projects that today's record highs will be average summer temperatures by 2050, with the South forecast to see 2 full months over 100 degrees.
And Texas has seen triple-digit temperatures now in its third week.
A different study warns that intensifying rainstorms pose hidden flood risks across the U.S. The First Street Foundation finds that rainstorms are capable of dumping significantly more water than federal data indicates in some regions. That means data used to set design standards for new infrastructure is outdated and understates the risk of extreme rain and flood events, particularly in the Northeast and along the Gulf Coast. Climate change has increased the intensity and frequency of severe rainstorms in recent decades, and that is raising the risk of U.S. flood control failure. In accountability news, Minnesota-based chemical giant 3M will pay more than $10 billion to settle a lawsuit alleging that its toxic PFAS chemicals contaminated U.S. public drinking water systems. It's the latest among several cases pending against the company. PFAS chemicals are used in firefighting foam, non-stick applications, and a host of consumer products, and are linked to cancers and birth defects. They're called forever chemicals because they don't break down in the environment and are incredibly costly to remove, according to Scott Summey, one of the attorneys representing the municipalities that sued.
These water systems have to install expensive water treatment in order to remove the chemicals. This settlement, being the largest drinking water settlement in American history, will go a long way.
I guess they thought there'd be forever profits from those forever chemicals.
Finally, some good news. The Biden administration proposed new rules to restore protections to the Endangered Species Act that had been rolled back by disgraced former President Donald Trump. The new proposed rules will make it easier to protect wildlife from climate disruptions and other threats, make it harder to remove a species from the endangered list, and eliminates a Trump-era policy that allowed regulators to consider economic issues like lost profits for the oil and gas industry when deciding whether a species deserves protections.
Good. We will take what we can get. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm still fixated on Mike Pence's statement yesterday in Iowa. Hey, we don't need those rich people paying their fair share. No, he said, quote, I don't really buy into the rich need to pay their fair share. And again, at least he's honest. This is one of those moments you go, he's honest. He's telling you exactly what he thinks. Now you have to decide which side are you on. And that's why I've asked our good friend Morris Pearl to come give us some thoughts. He's the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, also the co-author of Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rick. Great
so what do you think of Mike Pence's comment? You got any thoughts?
Well, I agree with you. It's good that he's being open about what he says. I will give the guy some credit. What he actually said was that the rich people pay almost all the taxes. And, well, it's true. There are poor people don't pay tax at all because poor people don't have any money. So depending on your definition of rich and poor, you could actually say rich people pay all of the taxes. And that just means our system is somewhat progressive. People with higher incomes pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes. To sort of be correct by Mike Pence's theory, we'd have to charge every person the same amount in dollars, and I mean, that wouldn't work. It would mean poor people paying a lot more, and they don't have any more, and rich people paying a lot less. And I mean, I suppose if you want more inequality, that might work,
right?
But I don't think so.
Well, isn't that the crux of the flat tax argument? I get this all the time. What we need is a flat tax. Get those people who have skin in the game. And I'm going, no, a flat tax of 30%, like the House Republicans proposed, 23 to start and upwards of 30%. That is a massive increase on working people.
Yes, and they can't afford it because they don't have that much money anyway. So it's kind of a ridiculous argument. I looked at some numbers, Rick. I wasn't sure about percentages, but I took some IRS statistics. They publish statistics every year. Income, people with AGI above $1 million, okay? That's about 600,000 people in the whole country, okay? Well below 1% of it's about 0.4% of the taxpayers have an AGI of 1 million or above. Less than half of 1%. Those people, but they have 20% of all the income. Okay, so 1/2 of 1% of the people have 20% of all of the income. And it's true. They pay 33% of all of the taxes. But they need to because they have 10 times more income per person than everyone else does. So it's not really they're paying no more as a percentage of their income than everyone else is.
Right.
But of course, they're paying more in absolute dollars because these are people with $1 million incomes.
In fact, in a lot of states, Morris, people at the bottom of the scale end up paying more as a percentage of their income than people at the top. I look at, Pennsylvania has that flat tax, and it's upside down, where the very wealthy, they pay, with sales tax and everything else, are paying a much lower percent of their income in taxes than someone making minimum wage.
Oh, sure. All of the flat tax states. I mean, all of the states that get most of their income from sales tax. People who have enough money they can save pay far lower percentage of their income in taxes than people who are actually living paycheck to paycheck because they're spending all of their money. And essentially, the sales tax applies to their entire income. Whereas someone like me sales tax might apply to a very small part of your income if you're mostly saving money and not spending it all. I mean, it's just so unfair that we're expecting poor people to pay a higher percentage of their income for taxes than we are rich people. That's why the rich are getting richer, and those people who are working for a living and driving trucks and teaching our children and taking care of us in the emergency room are just barely getting by and falling further and further behind every year.
Oh, it's interesting you bring that up because, I had lunch today with a friend who was saying, look, I'm fixated on the inflation. The government's spending too much money and it's causing all this inflation. It's a theft. It's a theft from the poor and the working class. It's a theft because wages aren't keeping up and all this. And I'm going, yeah, but instead of focusing on cutting food stamps and cutting programs that help the poor, why don't we look at the other end of things, which this guy really wasn't doing, because that's not what's been put right in front of him.
Yeah, we have to look at asking those people who are rich to pay more taxes. And yeah, that'll have an effect on the economy too. It's just kind of sad because, yeah, if you want to cause a recession and make lots of people unemployed and lose their income, yeah, that will make the price of eggs and gas and other things like that stop going up. That's probably true. If no one can afford to buy any gas, the gas stations will have to lower the price of the gas, most likely. But I don't think that's the way we want our country to run. I'd rather live in a place where lots of people can afford to buy lots of stuff. And yeah, if we have to pay a little bit more, that's okay. There was a time, Rick, when Democrats ran on inflation being a good thing. And you know why? It was because people making mortgage payments, their mortgage payments don't go up with inflation. That's the one thing that does not go up with inflation. The bankers that are receiving those mortgage payments, they're the ones who get hurt by inflation because the value of that payment stream 30 years in the future gets decimated.
Right. But the difference, Morris, was, and I talk about this all the time because my grandparents, basically lived what you were saying. They bought a house in the late 60s, and by the mid 70s, their mortgage payment was a day's pay because their union contracts had cost of living adjustments. Whereas inflation went up, they got raises to keep up with inflation so that their wages weren't eroded by it. We don't have that today.
We need that.
Of course we do.
We need more power for people that are working to see their wages go up with inflation. That's what we're supposed to have. That's what we need.
But the other side's going to tell you, Morris, but that's going to cause more inflation. You're making the problem worse.
Oh, it's just so sad. We need the people that are hurt by inflation are the people who have lots of money because they're the ones with purchasing power getting eroded. The ones who don't have any money, they have nothing to erode. And if you have a big debts, like if you owe a lot of money on your credit cards and your mortgage and your car payments and all of this, even if your wages only go up a little, your debts don't go up at all. And you're the ones who are actually helped by some inflation. It's just sad that people are really thinking about doing the bidding of the rich because they listen to your competitors too much, I guess, Rick.
No, I mean that's what they're told. We need low inflation, and we need to do make products cheap so you can go out and buy your cheap plastic crap from China. But your wages have been stagnant for 40 years and declining as healthcare erodes more of your wages, and your retirement security is gone because it's all now, hey, if you can't afford to put money away, you don't get a retirement. We're heading into a crisis moment. And here we are divided and pitted against each other over basic nonsense. Yesterday on the program, we talked about this guy from South Africa, Johan Rupert, I think his name was, where, back in 2015 was talking about, hey, maybe we should start planning for the future, for all the jobs that are going to be lost. Maybe we should start planning for the structural unemployment that's coming. Maybe we should start, I don't know, thinking about what we're going to do. And here we are all these years later, still having done nothing to help the working class and the working poor.
That's the whole point of our patriotic millionaires. is that we are trying to get rich people, investors, business people to speak out and say, we don't want to live in a country with a few rich people and lots of poor people. That does not work. You can't make money if no one can afford to buy whatever it is you're trying to sell them. And we have to explain that to our government, that having half of our population being poor does not work for anybody. And we need to not take money away from the poor people, which is what I think Mike Pence wants to do. He was complaining about Social Security and Medicaid and these things taking up too much money. We need to have the people who have all the money give up some of that so that the people who don't have any money can get some. And yeah, if you want to complain that our tax system is a little bit progressive, that's the most ridiculous complaint I've ever heard. Of course, rich people pay all the taxes because they have all the money. And you can't, what were you expecting?
Excellent point. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Morris Pearl. Morris is the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires. Check out their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. We'll get links out on social media. Also, the co-author of the book, Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. Now, I'm sure you saw the job numbers coming out today as President Biden is on the Invest in America tour, finally getting out and highlighting some of the manufacturing that's being reshored, some of the projects that are being created, and the jobs that are being created. In fact, the job numbers, 497,000 today, blowing away expectations. Thoughts on Bidenomics and where it's leading us?
I mean, a lot of people are getting jobs. Some of them are building those car recharging stations and things like that. So some of it's working, and some of it's good luck or bad luck or the weather or this or that. I mean, you can blame a lot of things, but yeah, people who have all this money from these stimulus programs and the Inflation Reduction Act are spending the money. And that means the businesses in their communities are selling more stuff and hiring more people. And that helps everybody do better. When people have more money to spend, that trickles up. Money does not trickle down from the rich, like the trickle-down theory says. Money trickles up from the people that have very little. And the way to make everyone do better is to distribute money to the people at the bottom, whether it's higher wages or tax credits or the EITC or the CTC, or any of the programs that help the people that have very little, because they spend all of the money they're given. Having a program to help rich people get richer helps that one guy. Having a program to help people that are working for a living to have a little bit more money in their take home every week, that's what helps everybody.
Yeah, I had an economics professor on the program probably about 10 years ago, and he asked me a question that is one of those things that have stuck with me all these years. He said, if you're a business owner, what do you want? Do you want a tax break for $20,000, or do you want 20,000 customers? And it's one of those interesting moments where what one side is saying, we're going to give all these tax breaks to these businesses and not give that money to the customers, to the disposable income to the working people, who would then end up giving the money to the business anyway. And I thought it was an interesting question.
Yeah, because the business guy only paid taxes on his profits. If he's not making profits, he's not paying any taxes at all. So all the tax breaks in the world aren't going to do him any good. What the business guy needs is more profits so he can pay more taxes, not less taxes. I was saying before, we were at a meeting today where people complaining about their fees they pay the credit card companies. I say, I'd rather pay more fees to the credit card companies because we get more customers paying with credit cards.
That seems like common sense to me.
Because there's so much short-sightedness in people. It's like the business guy, who's the Republican, is sitting there looking at his tax return. He's saying, oh my God, I'm paying thousands of dollars in taxes. If I didn't pay those thousands of dollars in taxes, I'd have more money in my pocket. But he doesn't think about the fact that the reason he's paying thousands of dollars in taxes is because he made lots of profits. And that the way to have more money in his pocket is actually to have more taxes because he has more profits. and then he'll be richer, and he'll have more workers, and he'll have more satisfied customers. But people, they don't look at things that way.
Yeah.
They're very myopic and short-sighted.
No, and lastly, I wanted to get into, because, I said a while ago, and I had a bunch of people going, that doesn't make any sense. I said, when we had a much higher tax rate, you could think 1950s, 1960s, wages continued to go up because, people didn't want to pay those high tax rates. So they gave better benefits and better wages to workers. They invested in new plants. They invested in new material and equipment and hospitals and schools because they didn't want to pay high tax rates to the government. That money was then used in the community in the way that they saw they wanted to see fit, and higher wages were a part of that.
And on average, those people were happier than they are now. It's just...
No, that's an excellent point. I had a very rich uncle who he was miserable. I mean, it was, he had this jealousy complex and this anger of, people, it was just a weird kind of thing. The guy had everything he could possibly want. Was one of the most miserable people I've ever met.
It's the people who are, because the people who are trying to be greedy, they're always thinking that other people are trying to cheat them because they're trying to cheat other people. It's the people who are generous. They kind of assume that other people are being generous, and they're happier people.
If only we could get back to those moments. But Morris, I appreciate the thoughts. Good stuff as always. Hope folks will check out the website, patrioticmillionaires.org. Get the book, Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer, co-authored by our good friend Morris Pearl. Morris, again, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Great to be in your show.
I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It's one of those things that, when Morris brought it up about people being unhappy, I thought about this uncle who, was a very successful business guy, and was angry that people would have the audacity to question his benevolence. And you get that kind of benevolent dictator kind of scenario that workers were demanding better wages, hours, benefits, all that stuff. And he took it all personally. I mean, it was all, an affront to him, and was very angry. And in fact, he had always been a fairly conservative Democrat. But, when Trump came along, huge swing over to the Trump side of things because, he believed the pendulum had gone too far. Workers were demanding too much. They were coddled. And I just remember, thinking, this is somebody who has whatever he wants, has the money to do whatever he wants, go wherever he wants, all of this stuff, and somehow really unhappy with it. And, it's one of those things where the more you have, I don't know, the Scrooge, the miser, I don't know. The more you have, the more miserable you become, because this idea that someone's going to come and take it from me, which is Interesting. Now, what Morris said makes a lot of sense. I've said in the past, and people have questioned me, I said, if I were around in the 50s, I would have loved to have paid the 92% tax rate. Would have loved to been able to pay that. In fact, I actually know a guy whose father was one of those people during World War II who was paying that high tax rate and was proud to do it. And I remember questioning him going, proud to do it? He goes, yeah, he was proud to be able to contribute that kind of resource, to the war effort and all this, very patriotic and all that stuff. But more importantly, he was proud to do it because he was making a boatload of money. He was up at the top of the game. So yeah, you want to make sure that, people are out there, keeping the streets safe and keeping the neighborhood, intact so things don't devolve. And as we talked about yesterday with this Johann Rupert, I don't believe he was doing it out of benevolence. I don't believe he was saying, hey, we got to figure out this tsunami of job loss that's coming. We got to figure out this structural unemployment that's going to be permanent, where people are never going to find jobs because there aren't going to be any. We've got to figure out how to do this. Again, back in 2015, giving this speech. Now, as I believe it was in radical self-interest, as the head of Cartier, who sells really expensive stuff, you want rich people feeling comfortable buying really expensive stuff. And his argument was, if your neighbor loses his job, you're not going to buy that new car or that shiny diamond or whatever, because, well, you don't want them knowing what you got, because they may come over and take it from you. And that's what happens in desperate places. So when I look at someone like Morris, and I like Morris a lot of this is radical self-interest. I want to make sure that I'm safe. I want to make sure I don't have to live behind an iron gate. I want to make sure I don't need 5 bodyguards to walk me down the street in New York. Morris is a guy, and I've seen it. Him and his wife, got good on them. They're just walking around on the street just like anybody else. And he's one of the wealthiest guys I know. But back to radical self-interest, wants to be able to do that. And you can only do that in a society where you don't have widespread desperation and the kind of inequality that we're heading toward. This is why wages have to keep coming up, which is why, someone like Morris would go, yeah, we need stronger unions. We need stronger unions. And he's right. Democrats, we're okay with inflation because inflation helps debtors. And what did we have, during the 1970s? We had a lot of my grandparents came back from World War II, bought homes, and were in debt. And by the end of the inflationary period, their mortgages were a joke, a day's pay. And they were able to build wealth, and they were able to pay off their homes and retire with dignity. All of that. Reagan forward this fixation on can't have any inflation. And we need to stop inflation by crushing unions and crushing a demand for wage increases, which is why over the last 40 plus years, we haven't seen the kind of wage inflation that you would need to keep an economy going. Now, look, I'm not an economist. This stuff just makes sense. It just makes sense. But again, I come back to the policies that keep popping up, the things that are allowed to continue to happen, and move us in a direction of smart policy. I think Biden's helping that. I think Biden is potentially able to change the direction of this country in a way that is going to be very helpful. If only he could articulate it. Reshoring manufacturing and rebuilding our infrastructure, but also talking about tax increases. We need to go back to the good socialist president, Dwight David Eisenhower's tax code. We need to tax the rich. Pretty simple, I think. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. We're going to find out what's going on with UPS and the Teamsters. Will there be a strike? Back after this.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. That was the day that the song The Preacher and the Slave first appeared in the Little Red Songbook. The Little Red Songbook was a compilation of labor songs published by the Industrial Workers of the World Union. The booklet was pocket-sized so labor activists could carry it with them wherever they would go. Music was an important part of the IWW labor culture. Joe Hill was probably the most well-known of the IWW songwriters. Many of the songs penned during this era are still sung at labor rallies and meetings today. But not everyone appreciated the music and the message of the IWW, a radical union that called for all workers to unite together. When IWW activists, or wobblies as they were called, would give speeches, they would sometimes be heckled and jeered. Authorities would harass and break up meetings. Sometimes Salvation Army brass bands that were competing for space and audiences on street corners would disrupt IWW rallies with their music. Joe Hill wrote his song, The Preacher and the Slave, in response to this musical disruption. He set the lyrics to the tune of the hymn In the Sweet By and By. Often, IWW songwriters satirized hymns played by the Salvation Army, which the Wobblies dubbed the Starvation Army. The lyrics tell of long-haired preachers who tell workers to stop agitating because they will eat by and by. The song was a critique of religious leaders who did not help working people. It became one of the most popular Joe Hill tunes.
Long-haired preachers come out every night. They try to tell you what's wrong and what's right.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
2 pieces of good advice. Never sign nothing by neon, and never negotiate with snakes. But Joe Biden violated both rules this year, getting out-negotiated by Senate Republicans and their tag-along Democrat Joe Manchin. As a result, Biden completely surrendered an urgently needed program for America, universal child care. The U.S. child care system is broken at every level. Availability is scarce, and even if parents can find an opening, the price is forbidding. Yet, care providers and teachers are grossly underpaid. So we're doomed by corporate greed and Washington's indifference, right? Wrong. Grassroots people across the country are demanding and getting real change at the state level. Last year, for example, voters in New Mexico rallied a decade-long care rebellion to put a landmark initiative on the ballot to guarantee that all children ages 0 to 5 have a constitutional right to quality early childhood education. Moreover, Amendment 1 allocates a steady stream of money from New Mexico's Land Grant Permanent Fund to make this promise real. The vote initiative passed with 70% of the vote. Vermont, led by such persistent grassroots groups as Let's Grow Kids, is providing $130 million a year to establish a solid base for universal child care. Last month, the Republican governor vetoed the funding provision, but a bipartisan legislative majority, prodded by public demand, has now voted to override the veto. Also, the red state legislature in Tennessee is providing a new and essential child care benefit to low-income parents of infants and toddlers, diapers. And even some in the U.S. Congress are beginning to get the child care message, having formed the first ever Congressional Dads Caucus to push family-friendly policies. This is Jim Hightower saying, when leaders won't lead, the people must shove them out of the way.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, like we talked about yesterday, doesn't look good for the negotiations between the Teamsters and UPS. Both sides pointing fingers, saying the other one walked away. And as I said before, don't care who walked away, who walked away from the table, get back to it. And if you're not going to use the table, let's put it out on the picket lines so folks can set up the information and set up some snacks and start marching on the picket line. But here to share some thoughts on what's going on, I've asked our good friend Richard Hooker to come talk with us. He's Secretary-Treasurer of Teamsters Local 623 right now, this minute, at one of the UPS locations doing a practice picket. So we've got Richard on the line. Richard, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what's going on? What are you doing, and why are you doing it?
Well, right now we're just getting ready for the practice picketing. We're getting our members pumped up about this. We're going to combine it with a July 13th rally. We want to make sure that our members understand what is going on, because this is very, very important. We are here right now at the Oregon Avenue facility to make sure that our members know what the issues are, what the strike is going to look like, what it means for their families, their benefits, and what we're really looking to get from UPS. So we right here right now at the gates now.
Now, as I said the last time we talked, what was leaked as the economic proposal was almost was really a slap in the face. That was almost yeah, we want you to go on strike. I don't know what the latest economic proposals were before the breakup at the table. Any ideas?
Rick, if you know, I know.
Yeah.
And I'm a principal officer of in the Teamsters. I have the largest Teamsters local in Philadelphia. We have the second largest air hub in the country, the largest air hub on the East Coast, and I don't know. So, all we can do is wait and see what happens from the IBT. Hopefully that we'll get that information soon, because you want to know, I want to know, but our members want to know as well. And that's the most important thing, because at this late in the game, our members are getting anxious. They're hearing a lot of rumors. They're seeing a lot of information on social media. They're hearing a lot of things. And that's what we don't need. We need to make sure that the information that we receive is the correct information. And only that can come from the National Negotiating Committee. So I'm hoping that we get that information soon, because, again, 3 weeks left is all we got.
Yeah, because I was under the impression that a deal had to be struck by the 5th, if I'm not mistaken, because of the time needed to run the ratification vote. We're past the 5th, so it looks to me like a strike's gonna happen. So the practice that you're putting in, obviously well needed. Now I hope that doesn't happen for a bunch of reasons. I hope members don't lose a paycheck. I hope that UPS doesn't lose customers. I hope the economy doesn't come screeching to a halt. But ultimately, it comes down to the dignity and respect that's in each one of your members' pockets.
Absolutely, and that's really what this contract is basically about. It's about that dignity and respect. We haven't gotten it for decades. We've been giving them the sweat of our brow, the blood, the tears. The pandemic pushed us to the brink, and UPS made record profits. And so our members, they want to share in those profits. We're not looking to get rich. We're not greedy, which what they're trying to make us look like we are right now. We just want what's fair. And whenever you make somebody record profits, you should get a record-breaking contract as well.
No.
And that's all we're looking to get.
No, and this is one of these things, and I go back to one of the biggest slaps in the face, and we've talked about this already. I know in my area, and I don't know how it is in Philadelphia or in Des Moines or in Chicago or anywhere else. I know in my area, the people working on the inside, the part-timers, during the pandemic, they were paying $24 an hour, because they needed people to get in the door. And then on an arbitrary day, they evidently just picked it out. They went from the $24 down to $14, and because they could. And this is one of those moments where you go, if you were paying the heroes and those essential workers $24 an hour to get you the profits that you made, that seems like that's a good place to start to make the part-timers' wage.
Right, a good place to start, and that's all we're asking. You can start at that wage and keep going up, and also give our long tenure part-timers a catch-up raise to let them know that you appreciate them for all their long years of service. But for whatever reason, and again, we don't know, that could be happening, but we just don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know. And hopefully this anxiety, this frustration that all of us are feeling right now could, go away. Because if not, if we have to rush to do this, we don't want to rush. This is a contract that's going to be in place for the next 5 years. This is what we're going to use to take care of our families and better our lives and just things that we need to take care of in our communities. So we need to make sure that we get that information out so we can explain it, go over it, address our members' concerns, answer their questions, and be upfront and transparent. Right now, A lot of that is not happening. It's almost as if we're going to give you the information that we want you to have, and not give you all the information so you can make the right decision. And that's going to take some time. 3 weeks is not enough time to make a decision based on what's going to happen for over the next 5 years.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on this, Richard. But here's the thing that I find most important is that I look at the members, and look, 97% of your members voted to strike. It looks like all avenues are headed toward that. As someone who's been on strike in the past, I don't want that to happen. But this contract could be that industry setting contract that raises up others, the Amazon workers that are organizing, that we want to make sure are employees, the FedEx workers. This could be that thing that buoys conditions for the entire industry up. So I think there's a lot more riding on this than just what your members get. Now I want them to get what they earn, but there's a lot more on this, I think.
Yeah, you hit it on the head, and that's what this contract is all about as well. It's about lifting everybody up, and this is what this contract will do. If it ends the way that we want it to end, you're talking about those Amazon workers, the Walmart workers, the Target, anybody in that industry, in this industry. It will lift everybody up to that industry standard, right? And so, again, we need to make sure that's what's happening. And again, we don't want to sound like, we don't know anything. There's some things that came out that sound good. But again, what I found out over the last 2 contracts, we're not going to believe anything until we see it for ourselves, right? And again, this is not a shot at anybody. But again, we've learned that we need to see it on paper before we can totally agree. And I think that's what our members are looking for. We're looking for the evidence of what you're talking about. It's one thing to talk about it, but if we don't have it in front of our face, it's hard to explain to our members who are anxious right now, because we only have about 3 weeks left, and they don't know about the wages. They don't know about progression. They don't know about are they going to have better access to health care? Is it going to change? Pension? We don't know anything, and that's not what you want this late in the game.
No, I'm right there with you. And the hope is that they get back to the bargaining table and they hammer this out. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Richard Hooker, Secretary-Treasurer of Teamsters Local 623. Check out their website, teamsterslocal623.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Now, again, I keep coming back to your members should get everything that they earn. This is a wildly profitable company, $13.9 billion in profit. They've done massive stock buybacks to enrich shareholders and the CEO and the executives. They've done all this stuff. There should be some trickle down. But for me, this is more than just your members. This is about society going, look, we work for these big companies. We work for these very profitable entities, whether it is, as you said, Walmart or Amazon or FedEx or any of them. Workers across the board should be looking to this going, they're fighting for better wages, hours, conditions. We can and we should too. And I'm hoping this is that, the 1934, strike in Minneapolis, was a huge push to make the trucking industry livable. This might be possibly, when we look back, a historical moment that does the same thing in the delivery industry.
Yeah, I mean, this again, this could be another 1934 moment, like you just mentioned. This could be another one of those once in a lifetime events where the workers win and it changes the lives of every worker in the country, especially for those companies who make massive amounts of profit. This could change their lives because we have given them the blueprint, the prototype on how to do it. And if people look back and workers look back, even non-union workers, if they look back and say, hey man, we can use this to form a union, because if those workers over there at UPS can do it, we can too. And so I'm looking forward to this victory, and I'm looking forward to raising the wages for everybody, not just UPS workers or Amazon workers, FedEx workers, but for every worker. Have their conditions raised, their wages raised, their quality of life raised, their community raised, That's what this is about, and I'm looking forward to that.
So I know across the country, and I know you're part of it in Philadelphia, there are these practice pickets going up, these informational pickets going on. What do you want people to know when they see this? I keep saying I want people to adopt a striker. Go find someone on the picket line, spend a day with them, bring them a cup of coffee, water or something, a box of donuts, I don't know. But go out and walk the picket line, experience it, and hear people's stories. What are you prepping for?
Well, what we're hoping for is really get our members acclimated to what it's going to look like if it happens on August the 1st. Give them a prequel to what we're going to be expecting from them if this works, but also send a message to the company that we're just practicing in preparation for what's going to happen on August 1st, and also give the public a visual on what it's going to look like to see 340,000 workers walking up and down the street demanding more, crying out, screaming, fussing, letting the company know you caused this. You caused us to be out here, right? And we're not just going to take what you're giving us. Strikes are a sacrifice. They are a sacrifice to, our families, and they are a sacrifice to, each individual. We're letting the company know that we've had enough, and we're willing to sacrifice to get more. That's what it is. It's really the ultimate sacrifice for a worker when they go on strike, because we have had enough, and we want more.
This is the last arrow in the quiver, and it's to be honest, you're fighting for your fair share, and that's noble. I wish you guys the best. And if this does happen, I hope you'll come back and share some more with us, especially as the negotiations happen. And ultimately, if a strike is needed, most certainly would love to have you back.
We'll be there. Thank you.
Good luck, Richard. Appreciate it, man.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good stuff. Richard Hooker. Make sure you check out their website, teamsterslocal623.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. But I tell you, give him credit. Out there at this time,
the year was 1892.
It is what it is.
At 3
We'll take a quick break, right back.
An alarm sounded in the town of Homestead, Pennsylvania. The steel workers who lived in the town were on strike. Andrew Carnegie was the owner of the mill, located just outside of Pittsburgh. The Carnegie Steel Company was making massive profits, a record $4.5 million just before the 1892 confrontation. Even so, Andrew Carnegie was determined to lower the cost of production by breaking the union. As the union's 3-year contract was coming to an end in 1892, the company demanded drastic wage cuts. During the contract negotiations, management didn't make proposals to negotiate, instead issued ultimatums to the union. The local newspaper pointed out that it was not so much a question of disagreement as to wages, but a design upon labor organization. The manager of the mill, Henry Clay Frick, tried to bring in the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, which was known for infiltrating unions and breaking strikes. The workers were determined not to let the Pinkertons into the mill. For 14 hours, the workers battled with the Pinkertons and attempted to sink their barge. At the end of the battle, 9 workers and 3 Pinkertons lay dead. 4 days later, 8,500 National Guard forces were sent at Frick's request to take control of the town and steel mill. After winning his victories, Frick announced, "Under no circumstances will we have any further dealings with the Amalgamated Association as an organization. This is final." This incident is worth remembering because today, many people are intent on crushing any attempts by workers to organize.
I was born in the cold fields of Kentucky. I moved north in 73.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Want to jump into the mailbag real quick. Got a number of emails I want to get to. Mary Ann asked the question why I don't support RFK Jr. Other than, Mary Ann laughing of why. Have you not been paying attention? Have you not been listening? I said from the beginning, I think RFK Jr. is a kook. I'm sorry, his heroin days, I think, scrambled the brains a little bit. But beside that, the most recent little bit of RFK Jr. kookery, evidently he believes that, I guess he believes that, as the guy who was interviewing, that Hitler was set up. Evidently, he praised this James Corbett, a Sandy Hook denier and 9/11 conspiracy theorist who's claimed that Hitler was a Rothschild and that Hitler and the Nazis were 100% completely and utterly set up by the international banking community. And when you hear that, think Jew, and the international crony capitalists, think Prescott Bush, but RFK, praise this guy. You go, really? I think you should probably, if you really want to be president, if that's what you're really trying to do, maybe pick better friends. Don't have picture taken with you and Michael Flynn and Roger Stone. Just, if you're gonna run as a Democrat, just kind of throwing that out there. And the anti-vax kookery. I had enough with RFK Jr. 20 years ago, when he got me all worked up, and that the vaccines that we were going to give our daughter were gonna cause autism. Fortunately, I trust my family doctor much more than I trust a former heroin addict kook, and we did what we did. But this guy's dangerous, and he's got the Kennedy name, so people are like, oh, he must be. No, guy's a kook. At least my thought. I got an email from Betsy, says, Rick, I'm not sure if you saw this, but Texas, through their anti-abortion law, there are more children being born now than there have been in past years. And she points to an article that says because of the anti-abortion laws in Texas that took effect in 2021, that in the 9 months in 2022, the last 9 months, there were 10,000 more births than would have been otherwise. And they look at this stuff, over years to see how many kids are normally born, and look at, there's a calculation that goes in. There's 10,000 more than they expected. And that's Betsy's point, that, it's working. And I'm going, how is it working? More children are going to be born. Okay. What are we going to do to support them? How many of these people how many of these kids are going to be born into low wage situations or all, you name it. And how are we going to take care of them? What are we going to do to ensure that through policy that they get education and healthcare and food and all the things that they need? And no crickets on that front. But look, I guess there's going to be more cheap labor. Yeah, I guess so. Marianne sent me an email, asked, that's RFK. Sorry. I already did that one. John asked why Nixon passed OSHA. Why was it necessary back then? How is it that a Republican got OSHA pushed through? And also, did I know that Nixon was in favor of a national health care program? I understand. Nixon wasn't today's Republican. They actually wanted to get things done, and also understand the labor movement was much more powerful back then. You go back to 1952, when when the Wall Street Journal said that they feared that the labor press had grown so powerful, that there was so much labor news, newspapers and pamphlets and radio programs and comic books and all kinds of ways of touching workers that the labor movement had produced and used to bring people on board, that they feared that the labor press was going to sway the election and end up having President Adlai Stevenson. Didn't happen, but it was one of the things that the Wall Street Journal was concerned about. Now you hardly see any labor press or any labor media. So Republicans have been able to walk away because they don't fear the workers anymore. They've gerrymandered things so badly that they don't fear the working people. because we've nicely divided ourselves up into red hat and blue hat. They don't care about us anymore. So even the OSHA of the time wasn't very strong. It had taken a little bit of time to increase, but it gave workers rights, as Jordan Barab said before, that they never had before. And by educating workers into how to protect themselves, we're able to use those laws. And they did that through their unions. And this is why, again, I'm such a, if you go, Rick, you sound like a broken record. It's because this is how we built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. This is how we built the 20th century American dream. And it's been Republicans over the last 50 years, 70 years, 80 years who have been standing firmly in the way and destroying it. Now, again, Nixon had to make that outreach. In fact, George Meany, the head of the AFL-CIO, a conservative labor leader, was seen often in the Oval Office with Nixon. We don't have that today because one party, Republicans, are hell-bent on destroying organized labor, hell-bent on destroying workers' rights, hell-bent on destroying what little rights working people have. Want to go back to the good old days, when it was a master-servant relationship. One of those things that at some point, we have to, and I ask my Republican friends, please take your party back to saying, I wish there were pro-labor Republicans again. I wish there were Republicans who go, no, we need to protect people on the job. That it's appalling what they did in Texas. It's appalling that they would pass these preemption laws, the party of smaller, less intrusive government that's going to make workers more vulnerable. It's appalling that Republicans continue to attack child labor laws, unemployment, workers' compensation, all of the things that built that prosperous working class. Now understand, they're pushing for the gig economy. Oh boy, they want that. Everyone should be their own LLC. Everyone should be their own corporation. So the main corporation has no liability. It's all on the weakest link. It's all on the least among us. So, again, I keep coming back to the reality. We don't have the power. We've been divided and conquered. And the labor movement is how we bring that power back. It seems simple to me. We're going to bring more children into this world. This report from Texas, an additional 10,000 kids are needing to be housed and clothed and fed and all of that, and yet there's no policy. There's nothing there to, and I would have been a little more okay with overturning Roe if on the next day they said, okay, we're going to pass a universal health care bill. We're going to pass a universal child care bill. We're going to make sure that families are able to support their kids. They're going to get the best education possible. There's something. We're going to make sure they get fed. There were Republicans against Biden saying that by 2030 we're going to end childhood hunger. That is insane to me. As someone who grew up in a housing project where people were hungry, it's appalling to me in this country, the richest country on earth, that this happens. And that there are people advocating for it. That's the thing that blows my mind. And that the rest of us aren't holding them accountable by throwing the bums out. Because we got a lot of bums to throw out. This is why elections have consequences. But as long as we're focused on all of this other stuff, other than what really matters, and that's what happens at the kitchen table, when people are struggling to make ends meet, we're going to continue down this path. Again, I want to hear your thoughts. Something I said got on your nerves, got under your skin, made you think a little bit. My favorite emails are always, hey, you're an idiot, but you made me think. That's always one of my favorite things. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, you'll get ours. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.